So let me put it on Facebook now.
Recording.
What?
It says it's recording.
They can't see it, right? You have your family watch this if you need.
So what I'm going to do is I'll mute everyone, but I'll allow you to unmute yourselves.
Last time I got stuff.
And that way, if you have a question, you want to interrupt me, you want to ask me something, you can do that. But it'll minimize sort of the interference in the chatter. So let me just add it to Facebook here. Okay, so we should be live. Let me mute everyone. Okay. All right, so welcome everyone to our Zoom into Passover session. It's going to be a time to talk about how we do Passover in these crazy, crazy times. It's not a normal year. I just wrote a Shabbat message and talked about how, you know, we're in this place of doing this home ritual when everybody's at home. And the Seder is one of the most, probably is the most observed home ritual in Judaism. It's been documented in the past. But usually we go to other people's homes. Not everyone goes, obviously, to other people's homes, but so many of us go to other people. And now there are going to be a lot of people separated, either solo, single, or maybe a couple, two people alone, or maybe a family. But you're used to having a bigger Seder. You're used to either hosting that bigger Seder or attending that bigger Seder. So the challenge is different, you know, perhaps for those two different situations. So if you're used to going to a Seder, now suddenly you have to do your own Seder. And how do I do that? I wasn't prepared for that. Or you have to go to somebody's Seder and, you're used to hosting a Seder, and now you know, it's going to be a very different situation where you're used to having people that you can just sort of shout across the table and give them parts and do different things. And now you're going to be maybe alone in a space or with just one other person or a couple other people. And you might be doing a Seder over Zoom. So you might have your family members on a screen somewhere. And how do I run the Seder when they're thousands of miles away and we're trying to use this technology, but we don't have the physical hands-on activities that maybe we were used to doing. So the point of this program is to go over a little bit of kind of what are we going to have to do differently this year to observe Passover, and what are maybe some tips and suggestions that I've been able to discover. And I'd love for everyone to share things that you've seen. I mean, we already had Ron's handy dandy kippah mask, which I think is awesome and super DIY. I love it. So there's going to be all kinds of things that I'm sure you guys have heard of that we can all benefit from. So definitely feel free to interrupt me. You can unmute yourself and interrupt, or you can raise your hand, or you can put it in the chat, and I'll see if I can answer it. So the first thing I wanted to go over and kind of talk about is the issue of food on Passover for this year. Now, I think we have the benefit of being in a part of the country where there hasn't been a lot of shortages, at least to my mind. I did go shopping a couple weeks ago, and there was a lot of stuff in the kosher section of our ShopRite. But who knows, you know, what tomorrow is going to bring, and things might be different. And of course, also now we're dealing with situations where there are shortages, but also you have a lot fewer people than maybe you're used to cooking for. So a couple of things to think about. So obviously we need to have certain foods on Passover that we need to get beforehand, or we could get it during Passover. So one thing is matzah that we need to get. That probably is pretty easy to come by. We also need to have a karpas for Seders, and karpas is supposed to be any vegetable. It can be anything. It could be boiled potatoes, which people have used in the past. We have the tradition to use parsley and celery and things like that, but it absolutely doesn't have to be that. It could be any kind of vegetable. I mean, originally kind of the thought was it would be a green vegetable, but as I said, there's a very long tradition of using potatoes, going all the way back to Europe when getting a green vegetable in early spring was not an easy task. So just need a vegetable, any kind of vegetable. The maror is, most people know it as horseradish or chrein in Yiddish, but that wasn't the original maror. The original maror probably was romaine lettuce, which used to be much more bitter than it is now. That's at least the assumption that we've kind of cultivated over the years romaine lettuce to the point where we've kind of eliminated the bitterness. But it can be horseradish, of course. It can be romaine lettuce if you can get that. But it really could be anything that's spicy, anything that can bring a tear to the eye if you eat it raw. So hot peppers, fresh ginger, mustard greens, raw lemon, anything that's sharp or spicy can be used as maror. And then for the egg and roasted shank bone on the Seder plate, there also is a long tradition of using substitutes there. Now, I did go and get a shank bone at the ShopRite a couple weeks ago, and there were a bunch that were still there. So it's pretty available, or at least was. Maybe there was a run on them. People were grabbing the toilet paper and then they went and grabbed shank bones. So it could be that it's gone, I don't know. But you can also substitute there. And even in the Talmud, actually, there were substitutions. So roasted beet was used in Talmudic times, and roasted rice. But of course, that's only if you eat kitniot, that is rice and beans on Passover, which is allowed, and the conservative movement has said that kitniot, rice and beans, absolutely allowed if you like. So another issue is cleaning, which when I was thinking about it, I was thinking that cleaning might be easier this year because, hey, what else do you have to do? You're stuck at home. Or it might be more difficult this year because things are chaotic. Or maybe you're used to hiring somebody to come and do a lot of the cleaning, and you can't do that this year because you don't want someone in your home who might have the virus. So the one important mantra of this time of year is that dust is not chametz. So for cleaning for Passover, we're trying to get rid of bread and bread products. Cleaning is great for your home, but it's not a requirement. Strictly speaking, general cleaning is not what you need to do before Passover. You need to collect all your crumbs and all of the bread products and get rid of that. So the other thing that we do on Passover is, and it's in all of the Haggadahs, on the day of Passover, the day of the Seder, we actually say this formula where we say, all of the chametz that I am aware of or not aware of has become nullified. It's like the dust of the earth. Then it does become dust, but in a sort of metaphorical sense. So it's no longer stuff that I own. I'm not going to eat it. It's as if it were dust. And that essentially gets rid of the problem of chametz for all the stuff that we missed. So I would say if cleaning is a burden for you this year, and it may be for you're thinking about relatives, elderly, infirm, people who will have difficulty doing the difficult effort of cleaning, to let them know they can do a basic cleaning, get rid of the chametz, and then this formula allows them to say everything else that I missed, it's as if it were ownerless and not in my possession anymore, and that's sufficient. So the other thing is there is kind of a hierarchy of purchasing that the conservative movement has put out, and that is that there are some things that you can buy before Passover that don't need a Passover hechsher, don't need a certification for Passover. And they've kind of extended those things as leniencies. So you can look at those, and if that makes things easier, more doable, you can rely on those as well. So any other questions on that? I know Ira had a question about suggestions for reasonable Seder plate substitutions, which I think I covered a little bit. But one thing to kind of, I was going to talk about Seder plate a little bit later, but one aspect of that is if you're doing a Zoom Seder, the Seder plate really is symbolic. It's not necessarily something that everybody on the Zoom Seder would have to have. You could have one person with the Seder plate, and the leader holds up the Seder plate when they get to those portions where you're supposed to point to various different things on the Seder plate, and that could be sufficient for everyone. So if you're doing a Zoom Seder and you got a bunch of people everywhere, they don't all need to have their own Seder plate. But there are some things that they need to eat, which I'll get to a bit later. So the next thing I want to talk about was the idea of doing the Zoom Seder at all, or Facebook Live Seder, or FaceTime Seder, or whatever it might be. One of the issues is using electricity on Yom Tov and Shabbat. And this is something that was addressed by some Orthodox rabbis in Israel and also by the conservative movement here in America. And there was a leniency offered for people to use electricity for the Seder. And one of the concepts it comes from is an idea called Shvut d'Shvut bimkom mitzvah. So Shvut is a rabbinic prohibition on Shabbat or Yom Tov. So the idea that, for example, there traditionally was a prohibition against using instruments on Shabbat. And there's also a prohibition on telling or asking a non-Jew to do something on Shabbat, which Jews are also not allowed to do. But since both of these are sort of lesser rabbinic prohibitions, if you sort of combine them in a situation where you're doing a mitzvah, then you have a leniency. So what that amounts to is there was back in the Middle Ages, early modern period, the idea that let's say you have a wedding on Friday night, you can ask a non-Jew to play an instrument on Friday night for the celebration for the bride and groom, because it's a mitzvah to make the bride and groom happy and joyous on their wedding day. So this concept could be used potentially for operating a streaming service for a Seder. So you have the mitzvah of being able to participate in a Seder. That's the mitzvah. And then the two rabbinic prohibitions are using electricity, which is some people consider to be only a lesser rabbinic prohibition. And then also having somebody who's not Jewish operate or turn on the Zoom. Or there's an idea in Judaism called derech shinui, which is you do it in an unusual way. So rather than like taking the mouse and clicking with your fingers in the normal way that we do it, maybe you do it with like your knuckle or something, or with the palm of your hand, and you kind of show that it's a different way. And the idea, of having somebody who's not Jewish operate it, obviously you're not going to invite somebody into your house. That's the whole point of why we're not having people here. But we have non-Jews that are in our family that are part of our households, and it could be a possibility. So for the added Seder, what we're doing is the first night, I'll be turning on the Zoom beforehand, so it shouldn't be a problem. And then, the Zoom eventually will turn off, or, we might figure out a way to like close the laptop, thereby, turning off the Sorry about that. My connection, I guess, dropped out, and I guess we lost everyone.
We can hear you.
Is it?
We're still here.
Okay, you're still here? Good. Okay. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
So that I think kind of covers. Oh, also there is a notion that on the second day of a holiday, you could be a little bit more lenient. Sorry, I dropped out again. Sorry about that. Let me see if I can get onto a better network here. Sorry. Hopefully this network is better. Okay. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is if you're a solo person or maybe just a couple, what's the kind of minimum that one would need for a very small, super small, simple Seder? We sort of talked about the Seder plate that you'd want to have, if you could have a Seder plate in each location, that would be great. But at a minimum, each location where they're doing a mini Seder, or that's maybe being attached to Zoom or another streaming service, everybody should be able to have wine or grape juice. You need 3 matzahs, the karpas, that is a vegetable, the maror, any kind of bitter vegetable, and salt water. So, uh, so that's sort of like really the basic minimum that one would need, and then of course the meal. But it's pretty, simple there. Now, it's also possible to fulfill the requirement for the Seder by just listening to the Seder being read or done somewhere else. So even if you're doing a Seder, let's say on Facebook Live, where there's not an interaction like on Zoom where we can see each other and talk, you could still fulfill your obligation for Passover by really listening over, let's say, Facebook Live and not having that interaction. But obviously, having the interaction is the best. So one also issue to think about is if you're doing a Zoom with your family is time zones. So there are certain obligations that need to be done at night, one of which is the kiddush, the drinking of the wine. Another is telling the story of the Exodus from Egypt. According to the Torah, it happened at night. The redemption happened at night. The Exodus happened at night. And so we actually have to retell the story at night as well. And also we are obligated to eat the matzah and the maror at night, less so about the night per se, but because it has to actually be the holiday to do it. So the first night of Passover only starts when the sun has gone down and there are 3 stars out at night. So that could be a little bit later for a lot of people. And if you're doing a Zoom Seder and you have somebody in California, there's going to be different time zones. So you have to think about those aspects. Now for the Adith Seder, we're going to be starting at 6 o'clock, which is way before the time, nighttime for doing the telling the story and for kiddush and matzah and things like that. So it could be that I'll delay those things until we get to nighttime, so that we do them at the proper time. All right. So in terms of Haggadot, so there are a number of different websites, and I have some resources on a Google Doc that I think was in the weekly email. A couple times we've sent it around, but I'll put it in the chat. So if anyone wants to look at it, you can. And there's a bunch of different resources there that you can take a look at. There are lots and lots of different Haggadot. There's Haggadot.com, which is a place where you can make your own Haggadah, but they have different clips. So you could sort of put different types of Haggadot, different activities together and make your own. There's also Jewish Freeware, which has a Haggadah that you can download and then you can manipulate it yourself if you like. And one Haggadah that we actually really love to use is this one. It's called A Different Night. And I'm going to be using it for our Seder for the community, and we always use it in our home. And actually, it was very nice of them. The publishers have put the PDF of this book online. So you can download it and use it. You can print it out. And that's really great of them. And it's a really wonderful Haggadah. And they also have a condensed version that you could use too if you're doing your own Seder. So there's a plethora, almost too many Haggadot out there. And we have some suggestions in this Google Doc. So yeah, I guess you could use the yada yada Haggadah if you like, Robin. We'll go over the minimum requirements for a Seder later. So as long as the yada yada fulfills those, I would say it's okay. So Ira and I guess Lisa also asked about a minimum viable Seder plan. Is it okay to virtually visit, participate in parts of more than one Seder? So it's an interesting question. So I guess if you're okay with using electricity on the Yom Tov, which is definitely a position that is allowed. There are a number of rabbis who allow it. Then I guess you could kind of hop from one Seder to another throughout the night. But you would have to take care to make sure that you've done the requirements that you need to do all throughout the night. So, if you are going to a Seder in one place and then you go to the next Seder, but you skipped a requirement that you need, that could be a problem with hopping from one to next. Oh, or we could have multiple devices set up. Ira and Lisa say, and Betsy says you could multitask. So if you're able to do that and have like one screen with this Seder and this screen with that Seder, and you can balance the different leaders talking and everything happening, then more power to you. I guess that would be the multitasking Seder. So the minimum requirements for a Seder, there are really 5 obligations, mitzvot, that we do on our Seders. So one is to eat the matzah, pretty easy thing to do, of course with the blessings attached. The other is the drinking of the 4 cups of wine or grape juice, also pretty simple. Eating bitter herbs, the maror. Relating the story of the Exodus, that is what we normally call the Magid section of the Haggadah. And then reciting Psalms of Praise, the Hallel. So those are really the 5 things that one needs to do. Those are the basic. If you've done those things, you've essentially done the Seder. So with matzah, we eat it actually 3 times during the Seder. We eat it once when we say the blessings. We eat it once when we make the Hillel sandwich, the korach, and then we eat it for the afikomen. So those are the 3 places that we do it. So as long as you eat the matzah in those steps of the Seder, you fulfilled the obligation. The 4 cups of wine as well are all throughout the Haggadah. The first one is at the very beginning of the Seder when we do Kadesh. And then the second cup of wine is before the meal, after we've done Magid, told the story. The third is after Birkat Hamazon, that's the blessings after the meal. And the last one comes after Hallel. Then the bitter herbs, we eat those twice. Once is when we say the blessing over the bitter herbs, and then next in the korach sandwich. And then kind of the big, not question mark, but the big challenge, I think, for our Zoom Seders or our small Seders is the Magid portion, is the telling of the story. How do we do that? And in a way that fulfills our obligation, but doesn't get, is not boring for people, especially if you have only 2 people at a Seder. And we were talking in our family a couple days ago about one Passover where for some reason we couldn't have a lot of people. I think some people were scheduled to come and they got sick and they they just bailed out. And so we had a very small Seder, and it was really, really, really difficult because if you only have like a few people around the table, it's not as lively as you'd like it to be. So so how do you tell the story and it's not boring, but at the same time truly tell it in a way that is relevant for people? So that's kind of the challenge. I was talking with a colleague today, and he said, he's kind of advises people to say, listen, if you've asked a question about the Seder story, about the Passover story, you've essentially fulfilled the obligation. We have the 4 questions that is traditionally the kickoff for the telling of the story, but the 4 questions are really prompts. They're talking points. They don't have to be the only questions that you ask. And the Talmud even says, if somebody asks a good question and that gets you started on telling the story, you have to ask the 4 questions. Those are only actually the default if you don't have a better question to ask. So you could say, like, everybody, ask a good question. And if that leads to a good discussion, you've fulfilled the obligation of telling the story. Now, the other obligation in telling the story is to explain the significance of 3 symbols for the Passover. One is the Paschal sacrifice. That's the shank bone. So you have to explain what that is. You have to explain what the matzah is, and you have to explain what the maror is. So my colleague today was saying, if you explain those 3 things and you ask a question, you've done magid. And I thought that was a good minimalist advice. Now, there's also in this book, this is actually the Leader's Guide to the Different Night Haggadah, and it actually has a legal minimums for the Seder. And if people are interested, I can maybe scan it or something and send it to people, because I don't think that is online. But it also is pretty basic and gives you kind of what are what's the frame, the structure that you can then build the Seder from. So for people who might want a little bit more than the minimums, that's the superstructure, and then you can build on other activities, things you might like to do on top of that Seder. So let me go to some of the questions that people have asked. So, Ira and Lisa have Seder bingo to make sure all requirements are covered. So there definitely are Seder bingo activities all around the internet. We've done it in our family before, where especially it's great with the kids, where if you've mentioned something in the Seder, you put a little, you can make little tokens or something to put on it, because we generally frown upon writing and marking on the holiday. So you can put maybe a checkers piece on it or something, and whoever gets something in a row could get a prize or whatever. And that's something you could definitely do virtually. So if you send out to people the bingo, they can print it out at home and they could do it themselves because they're just listening to what people are saying. Judy and Michael say, wash hands. Well, the Seder is great for that. We have 2 places that we wash hands. We don't just wash hands once throughout the Seder. So, and that certainly many people have made jokes about this year that we're going to be doing orchatz or rachsa all throughout the Seder. We're going to keep washing our hands. So Robin says, we can't allow Elijah in due to social distancing, but I would say Elijah is the one person we can offer into our house. We can't actually have physical people this year, but Elijah is the one person that we can open the door to. So Michael says you can't find the different night Haggadah. So let me.
I think I found it a couple comments down. I'd like somebody to confirm that this is the one.
No, that's Jewish freeware. Here, I'll put it in the chat. So it's at haggadahsarus.com. And that's the main site. And if you look there, it says special free downloads for the coronavirus emergency. And it has a different night classic, which I will copy that link address and also put that in. So let's go back here.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Yeah,
You were
sure.
saying, it's Amanda, not Ian. Sorry, guys. So you were saying as long as you explained, like, the different aspects in the shank bone, it would be Maggite?
Magid.
Magid. What does that word mean? And if you're one person, how do you just talk to yourself?
Yeah, so Magid means to tell. And it's the same root as the word for Haggadah, which is the telling. So you need to tell the story. So yeah, I guess if you can tell the story to yourself if you're solo.
A soliloquy Seder?
Yeah, like a Shakespearean soliloquy Seder, which I'm sure for somebody who's solo would be awkward, which is why if they can join a Zoom Seder, that would be the best, because certainly it's not fun. It's been done before throughout Jewish history where people have had to do solo Seders, but it certainly is not ideal. So you can technically fulfill your obligation if you tell yourself. So as long as nobody's watching, which I guess nobody would be, because they might want to take you for some psychiatric evaluation. But it might be fun. You could play the part. It's like, I'm Pharaoh and I'm telling you, you have to do all this work for me as slaves. But no, we don't want to do the work, right? You can act it out. One-man show or one-woman show.
Rabbi, you missed your calling there.
Thank you. So I like Amanda's joke that Elijah's definitely not practicing social distancing because he's visiting everybody's house. So Ira, or at least I'm not sure it is, asked, how do we integrate the current coronavirus situation in the story? I think that there's just so many ways. So one answer that Scott had offered is the plagues. That's a resonance right there. We were living in a time of plague. We could certainly understand, I think, the significance of the plagues. Also, we've had our freedom restricted in this time period. And I wrote today in my Shabbat message that we can really feel that notion of the restriction of our freedom, which is what we're trying to do on Passover. The Haggadah tells us that we have to consider as if we ourselves went out of Egypt. And that means we have to also feel like slaves sometimes. We have to understand what that feeling is. And while we're not slaves, we've experienced some restrictions in our own freedom. So I think another nice teaching that I've heard for a number of years around Passover is that Egypt is called in Hebrew Mitzrayim, and the root of that word is metzar, which is a narrow place, and Mitzrayim actually means two narrow places. And the thought by scholars is that the Hebrew comes from the idea that there is Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, and those are narrow places. We think of Egypt as a big country, but most of Egypt, the modern country, is desert. The actual Egypt where everyone lives is a narrow strip on either side of the Nile where it's habitable. And in ancient times, there was Lower and Upper Egypt, two separate narrow countries. And together, that's Mitzrayim. So Mitzrayim really means the two narrow places. And so we were liberated from the narrow straits. And that could be anything in the times that we live in. And today, the narrow confinement of social distancing and the very difficult times that we're all living through with so much death and grief is certainly a narrow place that we are looking for redemption from. So I think there's definitely lots more ways to make the story of the Exodus resonate, I think, for people today. So I think I went through that. Yes, Robin shared a link. I think I read that. Somebody asking Dr. Anthony Fauci for Passover Seder advice. I thought it was a good piece for people to look at. So I wanted to share maybe a couple of creative ideas that I was able to find. And if anybody else has any that they have thought of, that would be great to share, particularly for a Zoom Seder. So I put a link to this article in the Google Doc, but I'll also share it with you guys in the chat. It's how to host a virtual Passover Seder. So a couple of, I think, interesting, maybe cool ideas. If you're doing a family Seder over Zoom or you have friends that you're doing it with, you can cook together. So we're kind of doing this with Adith. Lisa is graciously hosting a cooking corner where she's going to be making some charoset, although she said to me to let people know, if you don't want to make charoset, you can just cook with us together. You can like make your matzah balls if you want while we're doing the charoset. And it's just fun to be together and cook together. But you could also, if you're in different places, you could all cook the same recipe. You know, if you're doing it with family, where you'll cook the same things, but you'll eat in different places. You could hold it up to the camera and say, what does your matzah ball look like as opposed to mine? Are they, you could even maybe beforehand weigh them, or do you have sinkers or do you have floaters? Hold up your brisket. Is it nice and juicy like this one? So compare it. It could be a nice thing and a nice way to get people together even before the Seder. So in the article that I sent, there was a nice idea of the Seder as salon, which is sort of asking people beforehand to bring a piece of art or a text, a poem, or a concept or an idea that they've thought of, especially that question I think that somebody asked before, or that Ira or Lisa had asked, how do we integrate the current coronavirus situation into the story? That's a beautiful question to send out beforehand to the people that are going to maybe be on your Zoom and say, think of something beforehand, and then we're going to carve out a moment during the Magi, during the telling of the story, where we're going to discuss that and allow people to share in that way. Another suggestion was to brainstorm and delegate roles together beforehand. So it requires a little bit of work beforehand, but if you know who's going to be on your Zoom Seder, to excuse me, to give different people roles, especially if you've never done a Seder yourself before, you've never led it, you've never organized it. So delegate it to other people and see how their creativity shines. In this article I sent, one of the roles was the afikomen hider, which I thought was cute, and you'll have to be creative there because you can't necessarily find an afikomen in someone else's house thousands of miles away, or even down the street. But what this person can do is could figure out a game or a quiz or a competition that the kids can do. The article said balance a book on their head while dancing, or solve a series of riddles. And that's the afikomen, you know, if they do those tasks, they do whatever requirement the person is offering, then they'll get the prize, which could be, you know, give it out later, you know, it could be an IOU or something, or maybe after the first days of Seder, you could Venmo them the money if that's what you do, because we tend to frown upon the use of money. I know people give money. When I was a kid, it was always like money at the Seder table, but halachically, that's a little bit problematic. But and then you could ask the person to be the music director. You know, if somebody is really a great musician, maybe they play an instrument, and they could play during the Seder, which could be a nice opportunity for someone. Not often something I think you see where in a normal year, you wouldn't necessarily ask people to bring an instrument to your house, although maybe we should, but you could have them play from their own home. And they can make a playlist beforehand. So that could be really fun. And then an idea that my colleague who I was talking to today had, which I thought was really great, but definitely requires some work, was what he's doing with his extended family that are in different places is a scavenger hunt, but in each house. So essentially what he's going to do is everybody, the leaders in each house, or somebody in each house, is going to hide the afikomen. So let's say it's 5 different houses on the Zoom. They're going to be the afikomen's hidden in each of those, but in the same place in that house. So like maybe behind the family TV or something, but it's in the family TV in each house. And then he's going to do a scavenger hunt that gets passed from one house to the next. So there'll be a clue that starts out in the Adler home, let's say, and the Adler kids have to find that clue, and then then when they get the clue, then they give the clue to the next house, the Gordon house, and they have to find the next clue. They find the clue, they give it to the Holloway house, and they have to, etc., until the last one directs the kids to that one place, whether it's behind the TV, you know, and the kids all go look for it, which I thought was brilliant, but of course takes definitely some effort, but could be a lot of fun. So those were some of the ideas that I had found. So, you know, Betsy's question, what if one person, me, her in her case, usually cooks for everyone? So, you know, if you are local, I mean, it's possible that you could cook the food and deliver it, as long as you take the precautions that are necessary. To maybe you wipe it down on your end, the containers, not the food. Please don't disinfect the food. But you wipe down the containers and then you leave it at the person's house, and they wipe it down when they bring it in. You know, that could be a possibility too. And you know, definitely you have to send some to Amanda because she wants some of that food. So Ron asks, you know, doing this is kind of hard with the 40 minutes of the free Zoom, which I think is definitely true. Although I believe that you can just you could just go right back on, I believe. So that could be a countdown. You know, you could say we're getting up to the 40-minute limit, and everybody reconnect when we lose you. And Michael says, you know, it's $15. You can also find some discount codes online to upgrade to the Pro if you like. So that's a possibility for people. And Amanda says, dibs on the name DJ Shankbone. You've got it, Amanda. That's what we're calling you from now on. So does anybody have any ideas they want to share? Maybe Jonah's coming over here to me. Do you have any ideas for creative things to do in a Seder? You can unmute yourself if you want to offer anything. So I like to, in my Seders, try to get as much participation as I possibly can. So we've done a game. I sort of mentioned in my my message for the Shabbat, where I put messages under people's plates, and I said, that I can't really do that this year, but I think you probably could do it ahead of time if you send things out. So the way this game worked was, I got these sort of non sequitur crazy statements, right, Jonah? Isn't that what it was? It was like sort of statements that don't really make sense in the Seder, and they were on a little slip of paper that were under everyone's plate. And I told people, look what's under your plate, read it, don't tell anyone what it is right away. But during the course of the night, as we go through and we're telling the story and we have a conversation, your goal is to slip in that phrase into your comments. And then we have to see if anyone can guess, what your statement was. And people really enjoyed it. So you could do that ahead of time. You could email that out to your participants and say, you have to put these phrases into your Seders, and then see if anyone can guess it when they're commenting. And I think I have it here somewhere, which I could send you the phrases that I found or that I created. I can't remember if I created them or found them. Yeah, so Michael put in the Google Doc again. Any other questions that people have?
Is it, I haven't tried to do it. Is it terribly difficult to share video over Zoom? There are some YouTube vids that I thought might be useful for Seder.
To show a video?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're comfortable with using electricity and a video on a Seder night, that could work too. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. What were the videos that you found?
Well, I found one. It's gotten me curious about it. The Jewish Center's former cantor Dulkin, has an interesting introduction.
Oh, okay.
And some songs. Something that would be missed in a Zoom version of a Seder is singing.
Right. Yeah.
So
Especially if you don't have that music director that you can designate.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that could work. Let me see if I can share. This document here. Actually, I could probably share it on Google Drive. So I just need to upload it. But it's called Seder Dinner Game Under the Plate. So you just would have to not do it under the plate, but send it out, I guess, ahead of time. So let me just access it here and share it. All right, so I guess, so people seem to be leaving. Let me just share this document. Any other questions or thoughts or ideas to
Yes.
share? Yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
When this, when today's Zoom is over, all the references here, do they disappear?
They don't from the recording. You mean
like-
the chat?
Yeah, like the links.
Right. They will be in the recording. So when we send out a link to the recording, but I can also, I think I can copy it, and then I can send it to everyone if you like. I can send it to everyone who's on the call. So let me.
Sorry to
Sure.
put you to extra trouble. I didn't know
No,
that.
not at all. Let's see. So I think I was able to copy them. And then let me put in this, get this link to this game. So you should be able to access it. Any other questions?
I have a question. It's Amanda again.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have to put away my broccolis. It's kind of a bummer question because I think we're all here right now because we want to do a Seder and figure out how to modify it. But
Right.
must one do a Seder? I mean, if somebody's just not feeling into it, can they phone it in? Or maybe, we tried real hard first night, but second night we're just gonna lay low. Is it like a requirement, one must?
Well, yeah. I mean, it definitely is a requirement. That's why I try to offer like the minimalist things that one would need to do. And for the second night, there's definitely more of a leniency because the second night is really a custom, not an obligation. So I would say if we're trying to, do the hierarchy, definitely best to do the first night if you can. If you really just can't do the second night, that's okay. And then, for that first night to try and do whatever the basic minimum that you can.
Follow-up question. What are we
Yeah.
wearing if we're zooming into your Seder? What's the
This-
dress code?
Clothes.
Darn it.
I mean, I guess, if you turn off your camera like you have now, we'll never know.
It's broken. Naked Seder. Got it.
Just, as long as your virtual background is not a big piece of bread. Or a field of wheat, I guess. Well, maybe it could be a field of wheat if it's not in bread form.
I've been cracking up this whole thing. You guys just can't hear it when we're all muted.
I have a
All
question.
right. Yeah.
What's the best way to put your computer or set it up so other people can see you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm trying to figure that out too myself.
I mean, I have a desktop and I have an iPad.
Right.
So I don't know, the desktop, I guess I could carry into the, to the dining room, but I don't know about the iPad.
Yeah. Well, I would say the iPad's probably more
Are
portable.
people going to be able to see?
Right. Right.
Well, if anybody comes up with ideas.
You want to,
Yeah, I mean,
you want to keep it at a little bit of a distance if you have a table.
Right, yeah.
And so the iPad should be fine because it's the camera that you're viewing, not you know, it's how big other people have their screens, not how big your screen is.
Okay.
I also recommend height. Oh, sorry, Michael.
No, I was going to say it's the camera that's important, and you have a pretty decent camera on an iPad. You just want, as Amanda, I think you started to say, the height is to make sure that, you know, you have it at an angle that people can see.
Thanks.
And well, I think also Amanda's point perhaps too is it's the more flattering position, you know, from.
Nah, girl, I look good at every angle.
But you know, coming up from below the camera, you know, it doesn't always look so great. So
You don't like my neck?
You look great, I have to say, both of you guys. But yeah, you might want, depends on what you want in the shot, I guess. So, you know, if you want more of the table in, you might need to put the camera, whether it's a webcam or a phone or an iPad, at a bit of a distance, so that you can get maybe the Seder plate and the Kiddush cup and things like that. Yeah.
I guess I could do that.
Yeah.
You can also use a virtual background so that you can have hair on your head like Bruce Kaplan.
Yep. Yeah.
This has been really helpful. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad.
But see, the height also gives you distance without having to have a larger room, and then it gives you sort of that bird's eye view. So start stacking. Oh, I said start stacking it on like encyclopedias or something, the bird's eye view. You'll get a better shot.
Okay.
Yeah. And you could experiment, see what looks better. All right, guys. Anything else? Any other questions? Or so I really appreciate you all taking the time. I hope this was helpful. And you definitely are more than welcome. We love to have you at the Addis Seder on Wednesday, starting at 6. The link was sent out, so I hope that you can join us. But I, of course, know that that we like to be with our friends and family, in particular at this time of year. So I hope, however you're doing the Zoom, whether it's with Addith or with friends and family in lots of different places, or even just down the street, but you have to do it virtually. I hope that you have wonderful, fulfilling, meaningful, and fun Seders. Chag Sameach, everyone.
Chag Sameach.
Thank you very much.
Passover. You're welcome.
This was frankly a much better guide than any I've seen so far. The people have just been throwing things into a bucket, but
Right.
this actually has a useful guide to it. Thank you very much.
I'm glad. All right, everyone.
Thanks, Rabbi.
See you soon on this screen.
Bye, Latov.
Bye, Latov. Have a great night.